turnover at halfway. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Clock at 10. Adams the off balance.
Oh, oh my goodness. 2 on the clock.
Hello and welcome back to the Basketball Fix. I am Ryan Tucker, the host of today's episode, and we have reached the pinnacle, the actual pinnacle of our NBL 25 team previews. It is the Tasmania JackJumpers, and I say the pinnacle because they won the title, as you all are aware. It was not the Perth Wildcats, it wasn't Melbourne United, it wasn't the Adelaide 36ers or the Illawarra Hawks, it was the Tasmania JackJumpers. For those of you that are watching, you'll see Jez is jumping for joy in the bottom right corner, and Josh is shaking his head. But gents, the pinnacle, the last team preview episode before we get into the season proper, before we get into talking about Tasmania JackJumpers, I just want to hear how you boys are. It's been a while since we've had a chat, and you know you're pretty good blokes, so I'd like to hear about how you boys are. Josh, how are you, mate?
Yeah, mate, I'm great. I don't know why we're wasting our time, obviously, touching on the Tasmanian JackJumpers and the NBL25 Wooden Spooners, but I guess we've got to do that as they're a part of the league somehow. They're not really a part of Australia at some sense as well, but, you know, we'll obviously have a bit of a conversation about these guys. But, yeah, obviously these are a couple of guys who currently feature very highly in my NBL Supercoach roster as well. So, no, I'm looking forward to obviously touching on this, and I've got a bit of a soft spot for the JackJumpers. Obviously, they took one of our great coaches in Scott Roth and also Jacob Chance a couple of years ago, and with that stole the identity, I guess, and the culture of the Perth Wildcats, and have done it very well over there. So obviously it was an awesome NBL 25 season, and looking forward to 24 season, and looking forward to diving in to see how their NBL 25 season will go.
You're sounding a little bit bitter today, Josh. Really, I thought it was just a pure hatred because of a better team, but you've actually got some. You feel like there's knives in your back because they've taken your championships away for the last few years. Huh?
I'm drinking a sugar-free lemon squash, mate, so I'm feeling a little bit bitter as that is anyways,
Wow.
mate. A bit sour and a bit bitter, but yeah, so I am a little bit, mate.
No, it's better. Today. Yeah, that's right.
No, not today, mate. We're a PG
You've
PG
gone
program,
soft, buddy. You've gone soft, I think.
I have.
All right, boys. Well, it is the Tasmania JackJumpers that is the focus of today's episode. I want to recap, as we've done for all NBL teams, recap on the 24 season. Now, the JackJumpers took their maiden title in NBL 24. And, guys, what a final series it was against Melbourne United. Jez, I'm going to throw to you first, mate. I want to hear your kind of just reaction, your feeling. Can you recreate the feeling you had when the JackJumpers took the crown from Melbourne United?
Obviously, that was a
Might
massive
just take my headphones
moment.
off quickly.
That was a massive moment, but it almost feels like the pinnacle of the whole final series was Game 3 and Jack McVeigh's 3 from just inside the half. It feels like that moment is the moment that's going to live on from the whole series, because it really, I guess, changed the whole dynamic. They went up 2-1 instead of going down 2-1. But just obviously, yeah, I'm a bit of a hanger-on, if you could say, following the NBL from like religiously from the start of last season, and sort of felt right from the start that the JackJumpers were going to win the championship. I think I even said it a few times to you, Ryan, throughout the year, that these guys are going to go the whole way, and they've become my team. And then, of course, I knew everything about the NBL after a half a season and picked the team to win, and now they are the reigning champions.
I don't
Come
remember
on.
saying that until like the semi-finals or something.
Don't do me like that, bro. Don't do me like that. But obviously, awesome season. Awesome. Yeah, I got some merch. But obviously an awesome season, very successful season for the JackJumpers, finally doing what they sort of come very close to even in their first couple of years, and finally getting that championship ring. But I think they did it a pretty tough way. They had a really strong start to the year, and then it looked like it sort of fell off rails in December, January period. But they finished the season strong, and I think that was extremely important because they were very down on confidence after that period. They went they went 5-6 to close out the year, and then obviously were extremely strong in the playoffs, beating both the Perth Wildcats. Beat Perth Wildcats. Did I say that they beat Perth Wildcats? And then they beat Melbourne United, obviously, in the final. So I think a really, really great year, but going to be very, very tough. It was very, very important off-season for them because they lost a couple of key players, which we'll chat about. But Josh, what were your true thoughts on the Tasmanian JackJumpers season?
I'll give you a true thought right now. I think I'm on the bandwagon. If you have listened to the Christian Doolittle episode right now, Doolittle is looking for revenge. He wants to kill the Tasmanian JackJumpers this season. So go check that episode out. It's a great episode. But I asked him, what's one team you're looking forward to playing this upcoming NBL season? Before I could even finish the question, I heard in my microphone, in the back of my headphones, Tassie. And that's all he said. He said Tassie right now. So now I just think it was realistically, it was a great season. I think it was one with a little bit of ebbs and flows in a way. I think, you look at a guy like Jordan Crawford, for example. I think he sort of sums up the Tasmanian JackJumpers' entire season. Starts out really, really hot, sort of dies off a little bit towards the middle end to the end of the season, finds a little bit of form in the playoffs, and obviously has that massive game in Game 5, which realistically won them the NBL championship as well. And, I think it was filled with a lot of controversy, though. Milton Doyle, obviously, unfortunately, I think he lost his father as well midway through the season. He went back home for a couple of weeks as well, and that really halted their momentum a little bit as well, because he's not just their best player, but I think he's their most important player. I think he's their most bigger leader as well. What you see on the court, and I think you might see a very quiet, nonchalant guy, but I know off the court he's a very hard worker, and he obviously is a very strong leader. So they had an incredible season. The thing is, I think it's great for them to finally get the monkey off their back, and that sounds crazy. They're only in their third NBL season, going into their fourth, but they've already made a grand final and a semi-final, and finally have obviously done the pinnacle and won the NBL championship. So, if you're a true Tasmanian JackJumper supporter, I'm very, very happy for you. But these bandwagoners like Jeremy Dark himself, obviously, come into the NBL, call themselves an expert, and obviously take out the championship contender. So, it's really, really exciting. But I couldn't be more happy for Jez and obviously the Ant supporters as well, because it's capped off an incredible 3-year run so far, and I don't think this is going to be the end of it, but it's going to be interesting because NBL25 is looking like one of those seasons where it could be good, but it could be really bad as well. So I'm looking forward to diving in more now, boys.
Yeah, at least I took a shit team to start supporting, and it's not the
36ers.
Brisbane?
In Sunday, October 6th is when the JackJumpers and the Wildcats match up for the first time in NBL 25.
We should do a live pod or what?
Yeah,
we
should do a live pod. We'll do our first live session during that game and watch it together.
There might be, I might go MIA, or Jez might go MIA at certain points if we bollocks our bloody screens of some sort, or whatever the case will be. But I'm looking forward to that. Obviously, it depends if it's in Perth, boys, because I might be doing my live stream from up in the stands as well. So that might be an even different dynamic as well. So I'm looking forward to that game, though, as well. I'll take the Rights first game, I think, though, as well.
Jez, the JackJumpers were a great defensive team in NBL 24. What are your reflections around that part of their game on court?
Well, yeah, I think obviously it's a good relation that Josh had with Milton Doyle and his the death of his father. It's that's when they went a little bit off rails. He flew home. He wasn't away for so long, but it felt like they lost their drive there, and it could definitely be because of losing their cornerstone, their key defender at the top, and that's where they were strongest. They averaged just 85.5 points against throughout the season, but where they won, where you push the numbers a little bit, they were extremely tough to shoot threes against. They had, I think it was the second lowest 3 points made percentage, and also the absolute lowest points from 3 points of any team in the NBL. So I think it was that perimeter defense that made them very, very difficult to put up high scores against. They obviously were about mid-range coming from inside, But without getting those extra points that can be extremely, extremely crucial to a victory, that's where they were the strongest. So I think when you look at what they've done in the off season, with this being a preseason show, they've looked to bring in some people that can fall straight into that system. So it's going to be very, very interesting. They lost a couple of key players, but I think definitely on the defensive front with Roth as their head coach, that's always going to be their cornerstone to how they play and how they win championships.
Josh, do you have any kind of comments about their playoff run and anything you saw in that kind of those few games which kind of piqued your interest, or either from a positive light or a negative light?
Yeah, the umpires killed the semi-finals. I'll just put that out there straight away. So, Perth should have walked away. But no, in all seriousness, I think the Jack Jumpers were just really dominant. I think they came in. I think the most important thing is coming into the playoffs healthy, and they came in with that sort of aspect of it. You look at, not making excuses for every team, but you look at Perth, they had Bryce was a bit banged up. Doolittle had a concussion problem. Keanu Pinder had a concussion problem in that particular series. You go to obviously the Melbourne United series, it was reported after, and obviously throughout the sort of series as well, that Chris Goulding had sustained a couple of injuries as well in the semi-finals. So, we touch on it all the time. People use that as an excuse, and we'll be like, this championship's marred because of injuries. Look at the Toronto Raptors in 2019. But it's not, because at the end of the day, though, they've got their strength and conditioning in order and all their players are coming in humming. So, realistically, you shouldn't be burdened or, I guess, spoken poorly about because you've got a strong, healthy lineup. I don't get it. I've never gotten it. So, realistically, it showed that they were the best team on the day because they were the most healthiest. They were the better team, I think, personally. I think what they've built is, a really family first culture, which is super, super impressive, obviously, for, a state which is, it's their first real professional sporting team as well. And they've got around them really, really strongly. And, they've created this whole motto, defend the island. And obviously, they've really played into that as well over their whole entire existence. So I just think their playoff run was nothing short of spectacular. And, you're always excited when you cap it off with an NBL championship, and especially when it's the first one, it's you party a little bit harder as well. And that's especially when, other franchises still haven't won an NBL championship yet.
Yeah, absolutely. It's massive. Now, guys, looking forward, they have had a bit of a turnover on their roster, and one of the biggest outs of the whole NBA, Jack McVay, signed a deal with the Houston Rockets in the NBA. Fantastic for him, and we hope from the Basketball Fix that he is a long-time NBA player and can really stamp his game over there in the States. But, Jez, what does the loss of McVay mean for the Jack Jumpers as they come to try and defend their title?
I think it is huge. It's probably the biggest question mark that they have coming into this year, because there hasn't been a lot of player movement, but I guess the two outs that they have with Jack McVay and Marcus Lee, who we'll touch on, are pretty big outs for them. But like McVay topped the Jack Jumpers in scoring with 17.3 points per game, and then was second in rebounds with 5.9 behind Will Magnay, and he also had 1.6 assists. And so, like, you've obviously got that production that you've got to replace if you go into a Moneyball type of thing. You need to get those points and rebounds and assists from somewhere. But McVay became also a cult hero. His run at the end of the year and obviously through the finals and hitting that shot, I think you lose that plays a big part. It's something that you can't replace. And especially with being a local player that fans get behind, I think it's a massive, massive loss, because obviously you saw what a crazy year he had and he was getting married and winning a championship and making the Boomers, getting an NBA contract. Like, you ride that momentum of somebody throughout the whole year, and it gives you that positive energy in the locker room. And that's something that they're not going to have this season with Jack McVay moving on. And they'll obviously need to find it and replace it somehow. But obviously, Scott Roth is an amazing coach, and everybody, I think, believes in this Tasmania Defender Island motto that they have and hashtag. So I think, yeah, you're going to be able to build that vibe, but maybe not to the extent with missing Jack McVeigh.
Let's just we spoke about in our preview about the Melbourne United. We touched on Marcus Lee now, and that's more of from a perspective of him getting into the team. How do we see Marcus Lee as a loss for this Tasmania JackJumpers, Jez?
Yeah, well, he's one of the best defenders in the league. He's very, very strong. Can stop anybody on his day. But obviously, we touched on it in the Melbourne preview, where he can get into a little bit of foul trouble, being maybe not the most agile centre. But I think definitely from a defensive standpoint and from the way that the Scott Ross defensive structure is, he was a very, very vital part. But I think when you're looking at it, it's definitely on that side. He didn't contribute maybe as much as you would have liked on the offensive side of the ball. So maybe bringing in somebody else to be able to fill that hole and get a little bit more offensive production, which maybe was a little bit of a weakness for the JackJumpers in NBL25, could be a big step, and it might be worth the trade-off there. So yeah, I think it is a big loss because he is such a high caliber defensive player and can change the momentum of a game with getting consecutive stops and being really, really solid. But I think it is a loss, but I think there's definitely the moves that they maybe have made in the off season have been able to replace that, which we'll get into later, of course. Josh, what are your thoughts on Marcus Lee's loss from the JJs?
Yeah, Lee and McVeigh are massive losses for this team. And, I think McVeigh's really built a career for himself as a Tasmanian JackJumper. And, obviously you come over from the Adelaide 36ers, and I used to never be a fan of Jack McVeigh, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. I just thought he was a real arrogant sort of guy, and, was a little bit quirky and a little bit different. But he really grew on me when he was a part of the Tasmanian JackJumpers. And I think that they really showed him that, you're not just a role player in the NBL. You're a guy who is a star player, and he's gone from a star player to a superstar player, and that's why he is now an NBA player. But in terms of Marcus Lee, I think it's clearing him out of the way now to realistically, make Will Magnay that number one guy. But I am going to throw a bit of a flag out there, because Will Magnay has been gaining a lot of NBA interest, and he's obviously already been over there before for the New Orleans Pelicans and the Atlanta Hawks on 2-way deals and 10-day contracts. So realistically, though, guys, what's the sort of plan if Will does leave? So they haven't really gone and signed a massive center. We'll touch on a center that they've signed a bit later on, who's more of a true sort of backup. But I think they've obviously maybe had that conversation with Will, and they're pretty happy with the fact that he's going to be sticking around for the entire NBL25 season, and that's maybe why they've let Marcus Lee go back to Melbourne United. But I don't think he's a massive loss if Will does stay around. But obviously, if I guess the void is sort of left by Will if he does go to the NBA, Marcus Lee might turn into be one of the bigger losses in the NBL. So it's going to be interesting to see how they all sort of transition and get through this whole period. But, I think it's really exciting when we look at Will Magnay sort of being that number one guy and hopefully playing between, say, 25 and 30 minutes and not, more 18 to 20 minutes a game as well.
Yeah. Do you think, just like to comment on that without going, I guess, too far into our next segment, but it's like obviously bringing in, losing Marcus Lee, you're putting your whole confidence in Will Magnay. And one aspect is, he's going to could possibly go to the NBA. At least they're going to have to rethink it probably at best at the end of this year, because you would suspect if he has another successful year or plays as well as he did play for the Boomers in his stints, that he might get a shot. But you're also putting trust into his health. Like, obviously, if they expect him to play big minutes, you would presume. And with Marcus Lee out and with the replacements that they've brought in, it is a little bit risky, don't you think, of letting Lee go and not maybe having that sort of 1-2 punch that they could put together last year?
Yeah, it's definitely worrying as well. And I think it's a tough one as well, though, because at what point do you stop worrying about players' injury history. It's one of those things, sometimes these players just get the right physiotherapist or they get on the right programs in terms of strength conditioning and they sort of get rid of all these soft tissue injuries. There's things, like rolling your ankle or, freak injuries like, say, let's just say an ACL or a shoulder injury, for example. They're things that you realistically can't control. And when those injuries happen, everyone's like, okay. But then when you sort of string those injuries along with, soft tissue injuries to calves, hamstrings, quads, muscle injuries like that, that's where it does get concerning for Will Magnay. And he tends to be one of those guys who's had back problems as well, who, when he is hurt though, an injury that might be 2 weeks for a standard player who hasn't got a crazy injury history, that sometimes turns into 4 to 6 weeks for Will Magnay. And that's obviously what you're touching on. That's where it's scary. But yeah, I just think it's one of those things. When do we stop worrying about injury history and just allow these players to play? Because if he's got everything going right, I think he's going to be probably the most dominant centre in the NBL this season. But there's always that black cloud hanging over his head, isn't there? That's probably why he's not in the NBA right now.
And you did start to touch a little bit, boys, on the players that they have brought into the team. And one of the big ones, I guess, to fill in that void is Gorjok Gak. And a third club in as many years, so a bit of it being bounced around. But what are your thoughts, boys? I'll get your thoughts first, Jez, on Gak coming into this team as that kind of backup centre.
Yeah, I think he's a big body, and I think it's definitely for him to, probably get less minutes than what Marcus Lee did, because you're expecting Will Magnay to be extremely dominant and play probably closer to the 30-minute mark, you would suspect, each game. So he's in there probably for definitely situational stuff, maybe when they just need to lock down and close out games or reduce some scoring, because he's a massive body. He's really, really strong under the rim, but definitely going to play much more, I guess, less minutes than what Lee did and what Magnay's going to play. So, but I think it is a really, really great signing. I think he has potential to play that role and be one of the best bench players in the game. So yeah, it is a great buy, but I'm a little bit scared that they maybe didn't bring in somebody a little bit more versatile, because if Magnay needs to reduce his minutes, I'm not quite sure what they do about that by bringing in bringing in Gak. So, but I don't know, Josh, what you rate Gak very, very high, man. What's your thoughts on his situation there?
Before we get into that, boys, just a quick one. Do you think there's the opportunity for the JackJumpers to go kind of small ball and with either maybe Deng at the 5 and playing Tarang at the same time, or adding in maybe Sword, have that kind of the 3 smalls? Is there a chance of that happening if Magnay can't be on the court?
I don't know if there's another option though, or what. Like, what do you do if Magnay gets injured? How are they gonna piece everything together, Josh?
Oh, it's a tough one. I think I'm personally a massive fan of Gorjak Gak. So I live in a suburb called Rockingham, not a town, but a suburb called Rockingham, and we're known as the biggest bogans in Perth. But Gorjak actually came and played for the Rockingham. Doesn't show. But Gorjak came and actually played for the Rockingham Flames this season in the NBL 1. So the Rockingham Flames over the last couple of seasons have been the benchmark in terms of NBL 1 competition and made it to a semi-final this year before eventually losing. But if you look back to last season when he was just playing for the Wildcats or what? Phoenix. But if you look back to, I'm going to mute you now. But anyways, if you look back to last season when he was playing obviously for Southeast Melbourne Phoenix as the backup to Alan Williams, when he got the minutes and the chance, you saw the increase in role in certain situations. So a couple of his best games last season, he had 10 points and 11 rebounds in just over 20 minutes, 12 points and 8 rebounds to go with 2 blocks and a couple of assists in 18 minutes. They're relatively good stat lines, 6 and 11, 6 and 11, 6 and 8. He's not going to give you a lot, but he's going to do the things that you sort of ask of him well. But can I interest you guys in this? So in the most recent NBL 1 competition, he averaged 20 points, 11 rebounds, 3 assists, and 1.3 blocks per game. So this is where I start to see the correlation in terms of when, Will Magnay does go down. I think this guy is a very good, serviceable sort of guy. But he's one of those guys, though, who's going to struggle against certain matchups. So I look at the Sydney Kings, and if I'm the Kings, if I ever see Magnay go down and Gack at the starting center, it's all out attack for me. Cam Oliver, Xavier Cook's obviously big guys. Keanu Pinder would be a nightmare matchup for Gack as well. I just think, you've got to look at it as he's a very solid backup guy because there's not too many great centers in the backup variety in the NBL. So, a guy who's averaged 20 and 11 in the NBL one season where there's been some other great stat lines from some of these bench players, and that's what we've got to look at more. It's the more bench players get the minutes and to sort of be the guy. He's showing that he can be the guy, though, for certain patches as well. So I'm very hot on Gack this season. I think he's going to be very, very impressive for the Tasmanian JackJumpers. But I know what you're saying, though, there. If Magnay does go down, it's going to be very interesting. But I think he can weather the storm for, 4 or 5 games, for example, as well, to be able to do some right things as well for the JackJumpers.
And another player they've brought in, Craig Sword. So an import player coming into this team and known to be a bit of a pesty defender, if you will. Jez, what do you see Craig bringing into this team, and how will he fit in kind of the rotations?
Yeah, well, I think he takes a lot of pressure defensively off, Milton Doyle. I think he's known to be an extremely good defender, and Doyle's even come out in the press and has made some jokes about finally he doesn't have to play as much defense. So I think they actually even played against each other a little bit in college, so they know each other to some extent. So I think that definitely on the defensive side of the ball, he fits straight into the system and will probably pick up, the 1 and 2s of the opposition and weather that storm for the JackJumpers straight away, which could be very, very beneficial to Milton Doyle in his game because he's not having to be that number 1 defender all the time. And then offensively, it's a little bit unknown. Like if you're just punching numbers and stats and looking at that side of thing, he's averaging just 9 points a game, playing for Indiana Pacers G League team, the Mad Ants. So funny he ends up back at the Tasmanian JackJumpers as an Ant as well. But he was averaging not that many points realistically, but still shooting at an extremely high percentage. He averaged 58.3 field goal percentage and 42.9% from 3. So he has the potential, maybe a pretty good ceiling to be a little bit of a sneaker offensively. And if he can keep that, obviously that accuracy and get a few more chances and a few more opportunities, which you would suspect he would in the NBL, then you could see him being an absolute, offensive threat as well as being the key defender.
Yeah, I've got a name that I'm going to put through Craig Sword. Now, my fellow NBL, people that have been around for some time now will understand probably why, when I look at these statistics and hear what Jez has just said, why I've put this name to Craig Sword. But Justin Simons, now, obviously was a guy who was brought over to stop Bryce Cotton, as everyone did back in the day. He actually was one of those guys who could do it at a very high clip, and he was a pretty efficient scorer as well. So I think it's going to be realistically understanding what his role is going to be. So it's going to be taking the best defender, the best offensive player on the opposition team, and which is going to free up Milton Doyle, which I think will free up Jordan Crawford as well. Because, when we look at a guy like Craig Sword, yes, he can guard probably 1 till 4, I think personally, but I think he's going to be realistically looking at guarding guys like Parker Jackson Cartwright, Bryce Cotton, Jalen Adams, these top point guards in the league. And I think that's why he has been brought over, because it's a weird league in the NBL. These undersized point guard shooting guards are really dominating the league at the moment. So getting a guy who's versatile, who's fast, but he's also a bit taller and a bit stronger, it's a really crazy matchup for these sort of lesser sized guys that we've just mentioned. So I think he's going to come over with some great class. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he fits into this team. because you could realistically, like you mentioned before, Ryan, that small ball lineup could be on with this team. You could even throw a Majuk Deng in there as well as a sort of small ball 5 who can shoot outside as well. It's going to be interesting. I think they've got a bit more flexibility this season. And they've sort of, not gone like for like, obviously, because they've lost, potentially, say, 10 points per game with the Jack McVay to Craig Sword sort of swap. But I think they're starting to build something quite nice in terms of what they're starting to get over here as well. And I think we're going to see a way more productive Milton Doyle, probably like we did in the first season when he came over to the NBL.
So you guys think he's starting at the 3, or is he coming off the bench as the first guy off the
starting
line, or? And what do you do?
Nah, definitely starting. I think personally, yeah, I would look at it personally. It's yeah, and Sword, and then potentially you could throw in a Majuk Deng maybe with a Will Magnay as the sort of 4-5. You've got to look at a guy like Majuk Deng who's done it on the Olympic stage most recently for South Sudan. So I think they're starting to build something nice there. It's going to be tough because you look at a guy like obviously Jack McVay leaving the squad. It's a massive loss, but I think they've brought in some guys to cover that. A guy like Ruben Tarangi as well will come in as well to this team, who is going to be quite impressive. But yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting for sure.
But
I just think
you're leaving your second unit to open. You're not going to have any quality defender in your second unit if you're starting all of those guys.
I think I don't agree with that in a sense, because I think Sean McDonald's a really underrated defender in the NBL, and he's starting to really find his feet. I think Ruben Tarangi is a really underrated player. Anthony Drumic is a good defender in a system-based sort of roster. I don't think that they're going to play. It's all comes down to Scott Roth's rotations, really. Not often do you put 3 imports out there and pull all 3 back off. So there's going to be a stagnant of minutes between Milton Doyle and Craig Sword. So there's always one of those guys on the whole time. And then you've got the scoring power S, obviously, that you can switch out with Jordan Crawford. So for me, I think personally, it's a really good dynamic to this roster. If Craig can be somewhat of a consistent scorer, it's going to be quite good for them. But I think it's obviously going to come down to how Scott Roth sees the rotations. And that's all going to come from these preseason games, which we'll get a bit more of an insight in over the next couple of days.
Yeah, I think that rotation, it is going to be key, because you're going to have Crawford and Doyle and Sword, and sometimes maybe you will play all 3 at the same time. But I think having that combination of, either Doyle or Sword on the court at one time, you're either going to get hopefully more production out of Crawford, and then at times you're going to be able to throw that Milton Doyle, you just play offense type of focus, which could open up a game, because we know when he's hot that he can definitely hit and be one of the best scorers in the competition. So I think that is a very, very dangerous thing, and it's sort of opened up my mind even right from now of just, okay, I felt a little bit like that maybe this off season was a little bit poor, and that it was going to be very, very hard to replace. They haven't replaced the scoring of Jack McVay, but when you look at it sort of how the rotation can then work, maybe they can get more production from some of these other guys, because they're not going to have to be totally focused on shutting down some of these really, really quick and hard small forwards that are, like you said, dominating the league.
I was going to go to another thought, but I'll go to that in just a second. I got a question for you, Jez. Who's the most important player on this JackJumpers team this season, do you think?
Man, it's really, really hard, but it's a toss-up definitely between still Milton Doyle and Will Magnay. I think if Magnay can dominate through that he did in patches and play that out for a whole season, I think he's going to be extremely hard to stop, because we even saw when he played for the Boomers, he can shut down anyone and be an incredible block defender, but then also be able to get free, and he sort of developed this new offensive side of his game that you could see his scoring and production definitely go up. But then obviously Milton Doyle is Milton Doyle, and it really felt like, okay, the JackJumpers rode the waves of his season and were best when Doyle was best, when he was defending best, and he could also split up a game with just a couple of threes at the right time and change the whole momentum and put them back in front, or slow down the scoring of the opposition from both ends of the court. So tough question. Sit on the fence, as we like to seem to do on the Basketball Fix, without having to choose anyone. But I'm going to say Will Magnay. If he has a massive season, then he's going to be the most important.
I'm gonna jump us off the fence before I get into my last little take here, but I'm gonna say that Jordan Crawford will be the most important player this year. So I think you know what you're going to get from Will Magnay, you know what you're going to get from Milton Doyle. I just think in terms of being the most important, they've got to replace the Jack McVeigh consistent scoring. And if Jordan Crawford can still come in and be a guy who averages, let's say, 18 to 20 points per game, that's going to really be able to help them and free up guys like Milton Doyle. Because if a Jordan Crawford doesn't come out firing, we know what's going to happen. He's a short guy. Teams will tend to just hold off him a little bit and close him out late. And realistically, we're looking at shutting down Milton Doyle and doubling Doyle or doubling Will Magnay as well, and just being like, okay, he's hot and cold. If we get him on a good night, we'll lock down very quickly, but we'll let him have a few shots to see where he is. So I think the most important player this season is going to be Jordan Crawford for them. But the thought I wanted to get to as well, now it's sort of a guy who they brought in, then lost, is Roman, and I'm probably going to mess up his last name, but Roman Salipa. Now, obviously, the NBL Next Star as well. He's come with a little bit of controversy. It was a bit exciting when he signed with the Tasmanian JackJumpers, their first official Next Star in their exception into the NBL as well. And he comes with a lot of class as well. But obviously a bit of controversy in terms of, what route does he want to go down? And it's a bit of a pathway that a lot of these players, I guess, do get to some point. You see a lot of AFL footballers in Australia. They may be really good footballers and cricketers, and sometimes they've got to make a decision, and sometimes they go cricket, sometimes they go football. I think Roman realistically has to have a bit of a hard look over the next couple of years and go, okay, do I want to pursue my rugby dreams and go down the rugby path? Because it's been reported that basically the Tasmanian JackJumpers wanted him to focus on basketball and stop playing school rugby and competitive rugby. And he went behind their back, it seems like, or an uncleared game of rugby. And there was sort of a mutual agreement, I guess, to end that contract. And he's looking at another team as well. So I think he's going to go and sign up at the Cairns Taipans this season because he is a Queenslander boy. But yeah, I just think it's very disappointing for the Tasmanian JackJumpers because when we touch on culture, it's important that they really keep that culture going. So they can't change their culture just for a young kid. If he doesn't want to fit into their system, then they're very happily to move on people, which I think was a great call for the Tasmanian JackJumpers. And it's very disappointing for Roman and obviously, I guess, his professionalism, which obviously has come into question over the last couple of days. But yeah, he's a sort of a great gain at the time, but is obviously going to be, I think, somewhat of a disappointing loss as well.
No doubt. Let's turn our focus now, boys, to NBL 25. And you both have touched on it here. What this team needs to be successful, and I think we're all in agreement, it's replacing those kind of 10 to 15 points extra that McVeigh was giving the JackJumpers last season. Do you think that that's all they need to kind of worry about? Are there more factors that will go into them being successful this season? And do you think they've achieved their goals through the offseason? Josh?
I don't think... I'm just going to put out the culture word there in some sort of, way. I think what happens sometimes when you win a grand final, you get into that little bit of a premiership hangover, and it's very hard, as we see in the NBL, to be able to back it up year after year after year. There's not many teams who have gone and had a three-peat, and there's not many teams who have also gone and repeated as well. So, it's realistically about nailing down that culture again, and I guess getting everyone back on the same line. This is our goal. We want to be playing this sort of basketball, this brand of basketball. We want to be making the playoffs again and giving ourselves the best chance to be in another grand final and competing for a championship. So I think obviously, whilst that is a big question, it's obviously great to see that they've gone out and re-signed a Jordan Crawford to another season as well to bring him back into the team because he was a crucial part last season. I know they've obviously lost Jack McVeigh, but they've also brought back in Will Magnay as well this year. So, whilst they have lost things, they've also re-signed people as well, which we don't really touch on because in these sort of segments, we're talking about who's gone and who's new into the team. But to really get those core guys and those culture guys, I guess, as well, and those strong leaders is really important to obviously what they're going to do in NBL 25. So whilst right now I can't see them getting to the level of basketball that they were last season because I still think they're missing a scorer, if not two scorers, I think it's going to be interesting because they're really going to create low-scoring games. So maybe it's not going to be the best sort of basketball to watch all NBL25 season, but they're probably going to win a lot of games as well because they can restrict a team to 70 points in the NBL sort of system as well.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Really, it is that. I think when they were best, or when you sort of felt that they were most in control of their season was when they were best defensively, and playing not this flary basketball that you might see over in Perth. They were playing a more grind out kind of game, which won them the championship in the end. But without going back into everything so much, they're going to play a defensive type of basketball. And if you're looking at, okay, what did they bring in? They definitely brought in more very strong defensive pieces. Now, if that's going to hurt them in the end, then it very may well do if they can't find those points from somewhere else through some good coaching and good rotations. So for me, I am still a little bit worried that they didn't bring in a scorer, just like Josh was. But I think time will tell with them, and how they go with this championship hangover will be very, very interesting to see sort of how they start this season.
The championship hangover is a very real thing. For those of you that follow the AFL, I tipped the Collingwood Magpies to not make finals this year. Early on in the season, I just want to make that known. No, but it is. I mean, especially in the AFL, it happened to Geelong, it happened to Collingwood, it happened, I think, to the Bulldogs after 2016. It's a very common thing in professional sport. The two-peats or the three-peats or four-peats are extremely rare nowadays, and it is quite common to see a team have some struggles the year after winning a championship. Josh?
We've got a quick question for Jez, though, very quickly. Obviously, being a bandwagon supporter, if they obviously have a bit of a disappointing season, what team are you going to jump to next?
36.
Because
Perth? Are you going to jump on my bandwagon after we win the flag?
No way. I'm going to jump straight onto 36 because I know you hate them more than anybody else.
That's all right. Bottom of the ladder, that's a great sign. Bottom of the ladder team, that's all right. You're in
only,
for the long
only way
weekend.
is up. Only way is up. I might come down there and be the coach.
They're handing them out in cereal packets, I think, nowadays, guys. Everyone's got a chance.
Win the lucky ticket in my cornflakes box. And anyway.
We wrap up our episode on the Tasmania JackJumpers. I want to get your off-season grade for the team. It has been a long and winding road for us to come to this point. The last grading of the last team before NBL25, and Jez, I'll give you the what do you call it?
The honours.
The honours. Thank you very much to kick us off.
Yeah, I'm going to give them. I had written down a B before the show in my prep, but to counter Josh's D- he's going to give, you got to give him an A. No, I think I'm actually moving more towards the edge of a little bit less. I think I'm going to give them a C+. The more we talk about it, the more I am a little bit worried with how they're going to go replacing the scoring and how their system's going to work, and a little bit, with their depth coming into this season at centre without Marcus Lee and how they're going to work around that. I think there's just a lot of question marks that maybe didn't get calmed, I guess, or nerves that didn't get calmed by a little bit of a better off-season. So I'm going to give him a C+.
Yes, I'm also on the C bandwagon here. I don't think you can't bring in more defense to a team that's already the best defense. There's only so much defense you can play. You still need to be able to put the ball in the basket and have that kind of spread of players. It will still be seen if they can hold out in that kind of center and power forward position if injuries do occur. Josh, what's your ranking, mate?
Yeah, in terms of off season, I've given them an A+ in terms of how much they've cocked it up. I think that's the best thing. But no, in all seriousness, I think I'm going to give them a C+. I think it hasn't been terrible, but it hasn't been great. So, I think obviously Jack McVeigh's still a chance to actually come back to the NBL if things don't work out. So if he does come back, it's going to be for the Tasmanian JackJumpers. don't see that happening. Let me just put that out there. But, I think it's been okay. I think I've rated Gorjok Gak a lot more than what a lot of other people have in the NBL circles, and obviously here today as well, which is, I think, a lot of people are going to see the development that he's taking, obviously, over these last couple of seasons. But, Jez, I've got one last thing for you, mate, and I've got two little wagers for you. I'll have $10 that the Perth Wildcats will finish higher than the Tasmanian JackJumpers if you're happy to do that. But I'll also have $10 as well that the Tasmanian JackJumpers don't make the top 4 this NBL 25 season as well.
Wow. They're pretty
do you
tough
accept
wages,
or do you deny?
man. I absolutely accept that the JackJumpers are going to make the top 4. I think that they've still got the class to be a top 4 side, even if they are only playing defense. But I don't know, your wages. I'm more interested to know about the juice of these wages. Perth finished second last year, and the JackJumpers finished third. So do I get more money? Do I get 15? I put down my 10. You get my 10, but I want 15 in return if the JackJumpers finish higher than the Perth Wildcats.
I'm happy to take it, but your analogy kind of sucks because technically the Tasmanian JackJumpers finished first and the Perth Wildcats finished third.
No,
so
but not in the regular season.
I'll take the 15 in the 5.
Are we talking regular season or are we talking championship?
No, we'll talk final ladder at the end of the NBL 25 season. I'll do that. I'll give you 15 if the Jackies get on top of the Wildcats, but I'll also take 10 if the Perth Wildcats finish above.
We need to start creating a graphic for all of these bets that we're going to start putting down throughout the season.
We need a whiteboard. We need a whiteboard.
Once we get into this Supercoach pod that we're going to do this week or next week, I think there's going to be a lot of wagers coming up there anyway, right? Because it's going to be a really, really shameful day at the end of the year when we two newcomers.
When I'll win the car and you guys win nothing.
In NBL. Okay, all right.
Yeah, you maybe win the car. You have to pay us $50 and $15 for the bets you lost in. As Jez was in, Jez, how about you let us know the NBL Supercoach episodes that we have coming up this series? What will you be touching on there, and what can our listeners expect?
Yeah, well, I think straight up we're going to talk obviously about this, how you build your Supercoach. There's so many new members coming into Supercoach, so I think it's important we start from the bottom and we'll work our way up into more technical side of things maybe in future episodes before the season starts. But first of all, I think we're just going to chat really about the differences maybe between MRL and AFL Supercoach to the rules of the NBL Supercoach, because it is very, very different. And then also, small tactics of how you work to building your team with double game weeks and player rises and building your team with cash cows and different stuff like that. So I think we're going to take a really basic look at it first. And then as the season goes on, I think we'll work into a lot more of the technical side to work out, obviously, how you win the car at the end of the show.
And if anybody has any questions they would like the boys to research ahead of the NBL Supercoach series, then feel free to send them in via Instagram or comment or anywhere that you can find us online. Josh, we have an award show coming up. What can the viewers and listeners expect there?
Yeah, obviously looking forward to that. We're going to be doing our predictions for all the NBL awards, including the Coach of the Year, the NBL's Most Improved Player, and obviously the big ticket item as well, the MVP trophy as well. We'll also give a little bit of an in-depth discussion as well on our championship predictions as well, which we're all looking forward to. I think it's going to be pretty standard across the board that the Perth Wildcats are the favourites. But yeah, obviously it's going to be a fun episode as well. And when we're touching on wages, boys, I think there's no bigger sort of episode in terms of wages than, we look at the end of the season and we'll obviously do a recap on our awards predictions and we'll sort of see who was the most right and who was darn right wrong. So it's going to be good fun. We might have put some money on the line as well. So whoever's the best overall gets a bit of cash, and whoever's the worst overall is the one forking out a lot of money as well.
Sounds good.
Definitely. And a pre-season recap we'll have to lead you into the NBL 25 season. We'll also look at win totals for teams, predicted win totals, and possibly hit some betting angles heading into week 1 of the NBL 25. Now, you can find us pretty much anywhere: Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, all your podcasting platforms, YouTube, the Basketball Fix podcast or the Basketball Fix. Hit us up. Let us know what you like about the show And if you have anything else that you would like us to touch on, we're all ears and ready to listen and help, well, not help, but accommodate to our listeners and viewers over the coming months. Any final thoughts, boys, on our team preview series? It was a great series, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And glad we finished at the pinnacle, at the top.
I'm looking forward to talking about the JackJumpers as the first team next year as we're doing our NBL26 previews, because as we all know, it's reverse ladder order. So it's going to be good. The last episode here and the first episode there. How great.
Perfect. Thanks, guys, for listening, and we hope you've gotten your basketball fix.
Pocket 10. Adams the off balance.